You as a people pleaser are taking advantage of those people because you are essentially giving them a false image of who you are, because they're assuming that like, oh, you're doing this out of the kindness out of your heart, but you're doing it out of the obligation of not feeling the discomfort you would feel by telling them the truth. It really just comes down to behavior. Like if I can change my behavior, I can change the programming in my mind and how it responds or chooses to respond to given circumstances.
Jessie Megrelishvili has committed himself to support men in overcoming their mental health issues so that they can achieve greatness in their careers, their health, and their lifestyle. With over a decade of direct experience working with male psychology, trauma response, nervous system regulation, and what creates high performance, Jessie has developed a proven system that can take any man from who he is to who he desires to be. Jessie, I'm really excited to have you on the show, brother. Thanks for joining me today.
I'm happy to be here, man. Thanks so much.
The first thing I would like to do is commend you for the work that you do to specifically help men overcome the traumas and the struggles that they're facing, because you're the first person we've had on the Be Better broadcast who specifically helps men to live a better life. Ladies, I'm sure you'll take away value from this episode as well if you're a frequenter of the broadcast. But we're going to be talking about guys today, and I am curious to hear your viewpoint because it's different as a man than it is a woman for many different reasons, which we're going to get into. And we talked about it before the show, the phenomenon of the Andrew Tate going around the world. And he's very polarizing the way that he says things, right? You know, some people it's either you love him or you don't like him at all. There really isn't a middle ground there, somewhat, but really not much. But I commend you for the work that you're doing to help men, because I feel that men don't receive the support that they need enough. So thank you first and foremost for what you're doing to share your message and to put yourself out there with your own strategies and process.
Thank you, man. That's incredibly humbling. Thank you.
So why is it that you believe, I don't know if you believe this, but why is it that men aren't receiving the support that they need?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can answer that question. I think a good place to start is just realizing that we almost kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, there's a lot of talk about the patriarchy, right? And it's in this way, it's in this assumption that it's a suppression, right? That like inherently patriarchies are suppressive, and they're designed for war and overt capitalism and destruction and, you know, all of that stuff. And it's really started after the sexual revolution in like the 60s, when, you know, there was, you know, I think it was like first or second wave of feminism, and there was this increase for independence, women's rights, and to whatever degree that was true, right? It's like, yeah, of course, and that there was like unhealthy levels of men running shit and destroying shit, and so it was teetered all the way on one side. And then basically what happened was there was the you know, the feminist uprising, but then especially the last few decades you're starting to see it tilt all the way the other way, where it's like this narrative around patriarchy really doesn't really exist anymore. We live in a really gynocentric, feminized sort of environment now, and maybe in some ways there has been benefits, but what you see is the way that it runs, it's not really supportive of men. And then the way like, for example, like mental health, right? Obviously it's part of what I do, but and it's cool that mental health has become mainstream. But the problem is that the people that are leading the mental health movement on a mainstream level are women, and the way women process their emotions and process their experiences are different than men. Like men do not men do not sit around a circle and talk about their feelings unless they're forced to. Like if they're like, hey, you should do this for your mental health, maybe they'll do it, but it's not inherent to them. It's not an inherent way that they communicate or that they share with each other. It was really funny. Like the other day, I was in the gym and I was in the locker room, and I was changing, and there was an older gentleman next to me, probably in his like 60s and 70s. And if you know anything about older people, they love to connect, right? They want to find ways to connect.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about football. I live in Ohio. I moved from New York City. Don't know jack about football.
I'm glad I'm not alone.
But there are a lot of football lovers here. And this guy, like out of nowhere, just starts talking to me about the game from the night before. Right. And he's like, and he doesn't even know what he's doing. Like he doesn't even understand, but he's trying to connect with me. Essentially. He's just trying to like connect with me on sports, on this like achievement activity based thing that's about performance and about results. And, it's just as similar as like someone talking about, like girls talking about The Bachelor, or talking about, what happened with Amy in the office the day before. It's like, that's our version of it. And that's just a very, very micro level. But essentially, I think a big reason why men don't get the support they need is because they are, most of the support that's thrown at them is not for them. And then any of the support that is seen as toxic masculinity.
That's true.
It's like exactly what we said about Andrew Tate. There's a lot of shit that Andrew Tate says that's wild, like just absolutely wild. I will hold that down. But a lot of the advice he gives to men, maybe if it was set in a more articulate way, is legitimate, super legitimate.
I think he says a lot of it in a very articulate way.
Yeah, exactly. That's also true.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is also seen as, dominance. Again, back to patriarchy, back to toxic masculinity, all these sort of buzzwords that are designed to kind of say like, oh, this isn't the way men are supposed to be. Like, we can't give men power because if we give it to them, they'll abuse it inherently. This inherent belief that men are evil is sort of the unconscious ideology of a lot of our, culture today.
So maybe this should have even been the preface to what we just discussed, because I love that, by the way. What does it mean to be a man?
Another big question, man. What does it mean to be a man? I think the best way to answer that is, I think it'll look a little bit different, obviously, for every man. But I think the most basic is, I like the idea of, I don't know exactly where I heard this from, but I like the idea of like burden of responsibility. Like it's almost like your mission in life is to take on as much responsibility as you possibly can. Because, and I'm working on an article for this right now, which is the more freedom you desire, which is what in the heart of most men, especially very masculine men, what they desire most is freedom. After working with dozens of guys, including myself, and reading tons of books about this stuff, it's like men really love their freedom. And
freedom of what specifically?
Freedom to do, be, say, have whatever they desire in all ways, right? Financially, with their power and their strength, with their sexuality. Like, they want it all. We love conquering shit. Like, it's what we do. It's just, it's within our nature.
Yes.
Is to overcome, make things happen, make things better,
solve problems,
and almost to a fault, right? Because that's where, just to, I might digress here for a second, but it's like, if it's not channeled in a healthy way, it's ultimately channeled in an incredibly destructive way.
Yes.
Because the guys who shoot up schools, the reason they do that is because it's a sense of freedom. Truly, it's just raw dominance over their reality that is explosive and wild and crazy. And it's just total, just letting go of all of the chains that have been on them, but just channeled in a horrific way, essentially. And so when back to what you're saying about being a man, to me, I think it's finding ultimate responsibility, because if you can, the more you're willing to take responsibility over your life, the more freedom will be afforded to you, right? If you take responsibility over your health, if you take responsibility over your circumstances, where you are financially, where you are in your relationships, if you take responsibility over the people you love and your willingness to protect and provide for them, if you take, the more responsibility you take, the more people will count on you, the more the world will bend in your favor, the more you'll be able to generate products and services that mean something to you, the better network you'll have, the more respect you will have from people you admire. Like, and it's all a process of taking on responsibility.
Yes.
And yeah, so I'll pause there.
This is so fascinating to me because, first of all, I agree with everything you just said. And I spoke to someone recently on the show who said a very opposite truth of theirs. Of, we were talking, and by the way, I loved this conversation with the other person too. And it's airing on LinkedIn today, actually. And she said, we were talking about a very successful person that you would know, we won't name them, but not that they'd probably watch this anyway. Maybe they are, that'd be great. But she said, this person is doing, achieving. They don't slow down. And I bet that they're stressed because they're doing so much and not stopping. And I pushed back a little bit, and I liked it because I was able to push back. I said, well, if that person did just stop and they just sat there in peace and wasn't doing anything, they would probably become pretty depressed before long. Like, when I think about the people who I know in my life, like some of my closest friends, colleagues, those who are unhappiest are the ones who aren't doing what you just mentioned. They're the ones who aren't conquering something. They're the ones who aren't claiming responsibility for an area of their life that they complain about, but they're not doing anything about it. Like, when I think about when I was unhappiest in my life, it was when I was 21. It was 7 years ago. And I was in debt. I was fat. I was unhappy. And dude, I blamed everyone except for myself, but I only became happy once I started doing the hard shit. Once I started going to the gym, once I started to get my finances in order and create a game plan. Like, I am not happy unless I am creating, unless I am doing, unless I am achieving. That is when I'm happiest. Even if I'm taking on more and more, I would almost rather have the stress of too much than the pain of too little, if that makes sense.
So this is a wonderful thing to get into, because, it's funny because you did mention it was a she, and the thing is like, men will say this stuff too, and that's again one of those prime examples of, like, when we talk about mental health and wellness, we don't realize how much it's driven by a feminine and a woman-centric narrative. Because yeah, like, if you're a chick and if you're like a feminine woman, yeah, of course you want balance, right? Like, of course you desire that ebb and flow of, you're in a creative process and then you take that time to, take a bath or relax and rejuvenate. Like, that's really important to you. Not for dudes, like, not for, especially guys that are in their prime. Now, mind you, like, I understand the need and necessity for self-care. I'm not saying this, none of these things that I'm speaking into are ultimatums. Listen to everything in a very general sense, because we're having a podcast about general ideas of reality.
Sure.
But like, I agree. One of the things I'll share is I grew up in New York City, right? Where there's very, very strong feminist movements. And I was a part of different, say, sort of spiritual communities. And those spiritual communities were also in relationship with a lot of women that consider themselves feminists. And when I was seeking to better myself, I very much rejected. At some point, I began rejecting sort of like success principles and this like, this grind mentality, because here I have beautiful women telling me like, hey man, like you can just, you can create balance in your life. Like we can hang out, we can smoke a joint, and then like we can work a little bit. Like it's very enticing, right? If you don't know anything else, it's this ideal of like this utopic way of living where it's like, there's peace and then there's ease, and then you do a little bit of work here, and then you go back, and then you have a little bit of sex here, and it's just like, it's like this exhale of life, right? Which maybe is nice when I'm all the way accomplished and I've conquered my empire. But when I'm 18 years old, 19 years old, like I'm ready to devour life. Like that is the time where you need to crush things. And even moving, 20s, 30s, so on. And when I would find myself in these communities and I started to engage in the activities that they would engage in, like these, these circles, and we would talk about our feelings, and it was like, I was getting a lot of validation from those women. Like, oh, he's so emotionally intelligent, right? He's so intuitive and he knows how to talk about that stuff. And it's like, and then on top of that, it was also this validation from other men in that circle as well. But the thing that I began to notice, because the thing is, I grew up in a town called Bensonhurst in Brooklyn, which, if anyone knows what Bensonhurst is kind of a rougher area. At least it was. It may be a little bit different now, but at least it was when I was growing up. And a lot of the dudes I came up with were freaking crazy, like drug dealers, gang members, and people who would just rob and steal and do crazy stuff. And even though that is obviously not great, you could tell that there was a lot of, whether it was right or wrong, there was a lot of strength and power just present within these guys. And then when I would start circulating around these communities, and participating in ultimately trying to get away from that environment, because it was so aggressive and it was so intense, and I started to fall into these other, spiritual communities. As I started to meet men there, what I started to realize was like, yo, these guys are kind of fucking soft. Like, like, yeah, they're really great at like talking about their feelings, but like, if I was ever in a rough situation, I would not want these dudes next to me. Like, I would not trust.
They'd be meditating while you're
they'd be meditating, and then it was also like, it was this false sense of awareness of emotion, because it was like, I'm going through this process and I'm feeling this stuff, and it's like this. It's just like they're trying to showboat their awareness over their emotions, but I'm going like, yeah, it's easy to say when you're like chilling in this like very comfortable environment with all of this like warm feminine energy around you. But what happens like behind closed doors when you're alone and you're broke because you can't pay the bills, and like you can barely afford a meal.
You have no skills. You're not adding value to other people.
No, you suck. Like you just suck, right? And that is what I started to see within myself. Like I was increasingly growing less resilient to tough things, because it was this overindulgence of, what am I feeling? How do I feel about this? What's going on inside of me as I process this? And it was encouraged. Like it was literally encouraged by the women I were dating, by the men that were in those environments. Like, just like, you got to feel what you feel. Like all this bullshit that is really good for women. Like, to me, I think that stuff is incredibly supportive for a woman's being and psychology, because especially now, because like I said, things have teetered so much the other way, where now women are expressing a lot of masculinity. So much so that
sometimes because they have to. They're with a man who
exactly.
is not adding value, who isn't becoming a person of high value, and they feel like I got to step up here and do all these things to fill in the gaps of what they're not doing. And
Exactly.
I feel that a lot of guys who find themselves in those spaces are trying to get with the women in those spaces, and it might happen, but then those women are like, I want a man. I want someone who's doing something, someone who's becoming someone more, someone who is going out there to conquer and create an empire. Like maybe not like a Genghis Khan kind of empire, but something locally, something in the community, something where you have purpose and you're actually making steps towards some, like what you said, some mission that you're striving towards. A lot of men, and not even just men, a lot of women too, they lack a mission in their life. And a lot of people are like, well, I haven't found it yet. I haven't found it yet. I haven't found it yet. Well, choose it. Like choose something and start making steps towards that.
Well, the thing is, it's not even about conquering something. Ultimately, it's conquering yourself. Like men, we just want to conquer ourselves. We are always aware of our insufficiencies, and we enjoy the process of overcoming those things, right? It's like there's no better feeling when you take a version of yourself that sucks at something and you make that version of yourself better. Like it's the greatest freaking feeling. Like I'm sure the first time you like got an invoice, in business, you were like,
feeling.
I did it. I like you go bonkers. Like, because you understand
Every time. Every single time, even now today.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you understand what it took about yourself to become the person that was able to create that opportunity.
Exactly.
Same thing with women, right? It's like a lot of times it's not even about, sorry, I'm going to stop hitting my desk because I keep shaking the screen.
You're good.
Even with women, it's, do we enjoy sex? Do we enjoy dating a beautiful woman? Of course. But what do we enjoy more? The chase. We enjoy like meeting her and playing the game and doing that whole thing to get to the ultimate place, because it's the process of overcoming some sort of obstacle. But that obstacle is ultimately us. Like that, everything outside of us is ultimately just a reflection of where we are in relation to that thing.
Yeah. Something I've noticed in regards to that chase concept too, because that's so true, is the most beautiful relationships. Like my wife and I, we've been together for 11 years now. We've been married for 5. And
Incredible.
One of the reasons that I love my wife more than anything, and she's the focal point of my life right now, is because it's been a constant chase. Like, yes, we dated. Yes, we got engaged. Yes, we got married. But it's not like I've ever sat back and said, I've got her. She's mine. It's been a constant chase of she's becoming this greater version of herself. I want to keep growing, and I must continue to grow, and I must continue to accomplish, almost not in fear that she'll quote unquote surpass me, but in fear that she'll grow faster than me. And I always tell people, find someone where you're at, right? And continue to grow with that person. If one person stops growing, that's when you want to start chasing someone else.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. When it comes to conquering and conquering self, let's say you're working with a guy. It's your first conversation that you're working with this individual, and they said, Jessie, I need your help, right? What does that look like to conquer self? What does that mean necessarily?
If a guy said, Jessie, I need your help, the first question I would ask is, I'd go, well, with what? Right. And so it's like, and I say that because I think what I often find is guys don't know how to articulate what's going on. Right. It's like they go, I feel fucked up. I'm depressed. I can't get my shit together. I'm fat. I'm broke. I can't get an attractive girl to date me. Like whatever the thing is. And I go, okay, well, what do you think is going on? And that's as far as they can go. They can just acknowledge that they're messed up, but they don't know how to pinpoint the behaviors that are creating their situation. And I think that's where the it all really begins. Because one of the things that I realized, one of the things that I realized as I started to go through my own journey was, I was reading so many books. I was reading so many personal development books and mindset books and, things on, philosophy and psychology and changing your perspective and all these things. And it was helpful. It was powerful. But the thing that I started to realize more and more as I got further along that path was, I was like, it really comes down to behavior. It really just comes down to behavior. Like, if I can change my behavior, I can change the programming in my mind and how it responds or chooses to respond to given circumstances. And oftentimes when people, anyone who's looking for help, men or women, when they find themselves creating a life that is horrible, they assume that it's this innate reason, that it's like they were born this way, or that like because of the trauma that's occurred in their lives, like they're stuck in this paradigm, and they need to have this aha moment, right? They need to have this breakthrough, freaking come to Jesus moment where they're like, it all makes sense and it all falls into place, and then they lived happily ever after. And like, that doesn't really exist. Like, it kind of exists if you do enough like mushrooms or ayahuasca, like kind of have that moment, right? Or if like you're in church and God enters your heart, like you can have a moment of clarity, but then you go back to life.
Yes.
And people, the one thing that I wish people would understand more when it comes to this is going like, it's not an insurmountable task to create a great life from a shitty one. It's not. Like, all you have to do is just start changing your behavior. And it becomes a process of getting really real with yourself and identifying, what is my behavior? Like, what am I really doing? What is the sneaky takeaway for doing that behavior? And what is the behavior changes I need to begin to create?
What does that mean, the sneaky takeaway from that behavior?
Okay, here's a good one, because it's been top of mind lately. Let's look at people pleasing, right? So there's a ton of people that get caught in this trap of over giving themselves to others, right? And they'll sacrifice their own needs, their own boundaries, their own creative juice,
their energy,
and just give it away to people who don't deserve it, who don't need it, where there's no ROI, and blah blah blah. And they'll tell the story that it's like, well, I just really care about this person. I really care about this person, and I don't like hurting people. I don't, all of this stuff. And it seems on the surface like it's this like virtuous reason that they're doing it, but really you're taking advantage of them. You as a people pleaser are taking advantage of those people, because you are essentially giving them a false image of who you are.
Wow.
Because they're assuming that like, oh, you're doing this out of the kindness out of your heart, but you're doing it out of the obligation of not feeling the discomfort you would feel by telling them the truth. So you are avoiding your own emotions. You're avoiding your own discomfort that would happen temporarily by creating this ongoing story in this person's eyes that you're someone you're not. And then ultimately what happens, right? It's like you grow resentment, you can't take it anymore, and you explode. And then they're left in the dust like, what the fuck? Like, I didn't know, or like whatever it is. Or again, for yourself, you do it so much to the point where you're never working on your own things. And it's the same thing with like a victim mentality, right? It's like that, and that's a story that's as old as day. It's like you blame your circumstances, right? You blame these things that have occurred in your life, and Actually, you know, it's a great one because like you mentioned, purpose. Okay. Let's talk about this whole thing about purpose, right? I get this a lot with clients. Well, they'll come to me like, I don't know my purpose, right? It's like, I feel like I'm just like missing this thing in my heart. And it's like, I don't know my purpose. And I'm like, well, why do you think you don't know your purpose? And you just go, you know, it's like, there's all these things that I want to do. There's all these things that I'm like good at or have skills in. But I don't know what direction to go. And I tell them, I go, that's bullshit. Like, it's just bullshit because you don't find purpose. Purpose finds you. Like, you do something because you have to do it and you have to create results in your life, because there are inherent things that you want, and ultimately just pick something, like pick one of those things and go as hard as you can. And then in the process of creating results, having people enjoy it, having people go, wow, this is amazing. Like, thank you so much for your service. Or, you know, I really enjoyed that. Or that thing really helped me out in a tough time. Or, you know, you start getting paid. That money that you earn from creating that thing, whether in a career or in a business, starts helping you create other areas of your life. Like, then you find your purpose. Like, purpose is not found in an isolation. It's found in a holistic pursuit of your life.
Have you found it difficult to stay laser focused on that one thing and not be distracted by what you labeled earlier as destructive behaviors? Because in that sense, we can look at destructive behaviors as really any behavior that takes you away from laser focusing on that one thing. Would you agree with that?
100%. 100%. And it's not even necessarily just like laser focusing on that one thing, but to me, destructive behavior, if we were to look at it like as rawly as possible, I don't know if rawly is a word, but as rawly as possible,
No, it is.
It's any behavior that isn't true. Like, if it's just not true to you, right? Like, if you're just doing it, and to me, when I say true, I mean, you would feel proud if people knew the intention behind what you just did. Would you feel proud of that, or would you feel ashamed?
So it comes down to intention.
Yeah, because people could do shit that looks good on the surface.
Yeah.
But if they're doing it out of obligation, if they're doing it to distract, if they're doing it
because other people told them they should do that.
Yeah. Do you know how many guys are really good with women, but like are living paycheck to paycheck? You know, like, there are guys that other guys would look at and go like, dang, like, man, he's always like got a new girl on his arm. He's always, doing something with some chick, and like, wow, look at her. She's a dime piece. Like, man, that dude's so freaking impressive. Right. But then, like, behind the scenes, he's like barely fucking getting by.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, and I get that a lot. Like, there are dudes who are, and I've been there. Like, there are dudes who have a way with words, and they have a way of flirting and, getting ahead with women. But
that's it.
And they can't be alone. Like, they don't know how to be by themselves, or they don't know how to be failing at something, right? Because they always know how to succeed with women, but they don't know how to fail with anything else.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. And I was listening to something recently that talked about there's different metrics of quote unquote success, right? And in the eyes of women, and really in the eyes of everybody. And one of them is physical attractiveness, right? If you have that, awesome. You've got one of the metrics already. But if you don't have that, then you've got to lean on the other ones, right? Someone who is in a position of power, someone who has power in a community, someone who has power in a business, whatever it might be, in a company, someone who has a lot of money, right? Someone who has freedom, right? There's all these different metrics of quote unquote power. But from what it sounds like you're saying, it's really planting the stake in the concept of self-mastery and taking ultimate responsibility of your fitness, your finances, the relationships that you have in your life, your own spirituality, whatever that means, but not just sitting there and doing nothing about it and just thinking about it and meditating on it, but doing the actions every single day, the behaviors. And something that I like about what you said too is it's It's the actions that you're putting forth. It's doing the things that you don't want to do. Like when you went to the gym and had that conversation with the older guy, I'm assuming you didn't wake up and you said, I really want to go to the gym today. I'm so excited to work out. Like you went because it's ingrained in your process. You understand, if I don't go, then I'm going to wane in one or several of these areas. And I think, and I'm going to ask you, what are those universal behaviors that when you're working with a group of 15 to 20 men, most of these behaviors are true for all and get results for all? I would say fitness is first and foremost. If you are not going to the gym, or not just going to the gym, but if you're not moving your body intentionally in a way to generate energy, in a way to feel better, then you are leaving realistically, and I'm serious when I say this, 60% of your joy or your fulfillment in life on the table if you're not actively working out, sweating, really going hardcore in some physical aspect, then you're leaving a lot of your joy and happiness on the table.
Yeah. So I actually have a story specifically about fitness, and then we can get into like more of the universal principles. So I lived in California in 2019, and it was, I was working at the Czech Institute. If anyone here has ever heard of Paul Czech, it's a holistic health institute, and I was working on their marketing team.
Cool.
And I was going through their training as well to, improve my coaching skills and so on and so forth. I was living in California. I was completely, to keep it brief, it was up until this point, emotionally, the toughest year of my life. I was completely alone. I had no one around me. I was really bad, worst depression I ever had. I was binge eating, like eating out of trash cans, stealing my roommates' food. Like it was a dark, dark time in my life. And that didn't stop. Like ultimately it was funny enough. I moved back to New York like 3 weeks before the shutdown. I was living with my girlfriend at the time, who was making, a good 6-figure salary. I was shit. I was barely making $1,000 a month at that point. I gained like 10, 15 pounds from all the binge eating. So I was definitely overweight. I had no control over my mental state. Like that year really jacked me up. Mm-hmm. And then when I came back, it was like, I was promised this job. I was coming back. I was promised this job locally at a gym that was going to pay me like, $2,000 to $3,000 a month. And I was like, all right, I'm going to get back on my feet, even though I was already like still jacked up. And then 2 weeks later, the shutdown happens.
Yeah.
And so I'm out of a job.
Yeah.
And I'm still all jacked up from my time in California. And I'm also with a girl that makes a good income. Yeah. And I'm a very proud man. So it was rough. It was a rough moment.
Yeah.
And I remember at one point, I'm just like sitting there on the couch, and I was like, I got to fucking do something. Like I got to do something where I feel like I'm achieving something. And so I just started working out like a madman. Like I would work out every day, sometimes twice a day. I would progressively increase the workouts. I would lift. I would do yoga. I was going crazy for about a month there. For about a month, I just went hard, and then after that, I slowly began to gain that inner confidence to apply it to other areas.
Momentum,
exactly. And fitness is the fastest momentum. Health and fitness is the fastest momentum you can build in your life.
That's
because
true.
It's all in your hands. Like you don't need a crazy business plan. You don't need someone to enroll in your idea. You don't need someone to approve you for a job. You don't need anything. Like if all you've got is a fucking floor and your body, you can begin. Like if you knock out 100 push-ups right now, you're going to want to do something else after that.
Oh yeah.
Right? If you make yourself a legit meal with good quality protein, good quality fat, right? Some healthy source of carbohydrates, you're gonna eat that, and you're gonna be like, damn, like I'm fueling my body with like good stuff,
Yes.
And it's all right there for you. Like it's the craziest lever to ever pull. And the old adage is like, how you do anything is how you do everything. Like it's going to be really hard for you not to feel motivated or inspired to crush it in other areas of your life if you're going really hard in one.
Yeah. It's impossible to be depressed and anxious when you're lifting something heavy, when you're running, half speed on the treadmill, when you're on the elliptical going hard on the rolling hill setting. Like it's impossible to contemplate how quote unquote terrible your life is when you are giving it your all, when you're sweating profusely. Like even now at the gym, whenever I see anyone, whether they're healthy, unhealthy, whatever, when their shirt is like dark from all the sweat from that workout, I'm like, fuck yeah, brother. Like seriously, incredible. Or sister, regardless, like it's impossible to feel bad about yourself when you are working out and taking care of yourself. And like you said, it's the easiest thing that anyone can do. You even hear the story of Tony Robbins and what the turning point was for him. He was this fat guy living in his apartment in California, and he was just depressed, sad. Bill collectors were coming after him, and he's like, what can I do right now? I can go outside and I can run, right? He turned on Barracuda by heart, and he went outside and he just ran and ran and ran until he couldn't run anymore, until he broke himself physically. And he realized, this is the turning point for my life. If you are upset, if you are anxious, if you're depressed, whatever emotion you want to attach to the way that you're feeling, the state of your life, the number one thing, the first thing you can do is right now, you turn this off, even I won't be offended. You can literally drop where you are and do push-ups, even if it's 2, even if it's 1, even if you can only go halfway down. If you have to do sit-ups, do that. If you have to run in place, do that. There's thousands of YouTube videos out there that are literally free hour-long workouts that you can do. And afterwards, you'll be sweating. You'll be feeling great. And really what it comes down to, what you just said, is while fitness is the fastest way to really feel like you accomplished something, the question I pose to everyone listening is, when do you feel most successful in your life? When do you feel best? After you do what? That's a really great place to dive into your purpose. Because if you feel really good after you do something and it adds value to other people and other people are interested, maybe they're not at first, but they will once you get better at it, then go all in on that thing that makes you feel good. Like even you said, you did a podcast for several years and then you shifted and you pivoted, and that's fine. You realized, hey, this isn't the thing that makes me feel most successful, so I'm going to pivot to what does. And that's really what the journey of life is all about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one thing I want to just say in regards to the fitness piece as well is the other thing that's going on there that most people don't even realize is you're changing your state, right? And this is something we could dive into a little bit here, because one of the things I really focus on is nervous system regulation. And that's a form of it, right? When you're depressed, right? When you're feeling depression, or you're feeling anxiety, you are likely in a fight, flight, or freeze state, right? Typically, both of those end you up in freeze or flight, in some regards, where you just are constantly attempting to escape. But essentially, when you are, whatever emotion you're feeling, you can see it on a person's body, right? You can see it in the way someone is physically expressing themselves.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different ways where you can do, state changing, but the most immediate is the fitness, right? If I'm huffing and puffing and in cadence in a jog, or if I'm, knocking out push-ups, like I'm literally changing my physiology. And that's another big thing when we talk about mental health, is like mental health is physical health, is physiological health, right? It's like your people are so overconsumed with the mind in reference to their emotions. But what you realize when you start really diving deep into the body and breath work and being present with everything below the neck, what you realize is that your thoughts and emotions are incredibly fleeting.
Yeah.
Like, I can put you in a breath session for, like, yesterday I had a client who came on, and he just starts blabbing. Like, there was a bunch of stuff that happened this week. His daughter might be diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. He was having trouble in his relationship, things at work where he got subpoenaed by some students, parents at work, for them to come in for court over crazy stuff. And like, he's just going on and on and on and on. Right. And what do a lot of, like, either therapists or
how do you feel about these
how
events?
do you feel about that?
Yeah.
I just told you I fucking feel. I feel like shit. Or like, or like even other coaches, right, that I've seen it, and I've done it in the past too. So I get it, where it's like,
it can have a time and place.
Well, where it's like advice, right? It's like, now let's talk about, like, how let's workshop this, bro. Like,
let's talk about your morning routine.
Yeah. Let's focus that. And all I did was like, all right, cool, man. So, like, why don't you sit back and, like, let's just breathe for a second. And literally 5 minutes of deep parasympathetic breathing. And he opens his eyes and he goes, word, I have a lot of control over this situation. I was like, yeah, you do.
So what does that, because that changes your state and physiology very quickly. What's an example of that parasympathetic breathing that someone listening right now could try where they are right now to change their state?
Well, if you would be down,
I'm down.
I can take you through a little bit.
Sure. Just a taste of it.
Yeah, sure. So anyone who's listening, and you can take a seat, keep your feet planted on the ground, and we can start with eyes open. So just have a relaxed gaze on the room around you. And you're going to want to inhale through your nose and exhale through the mouth. And ensuring that your exhales are longer than your inhales. Imagine that when you're breathing out, you are blowing out a candle. And now closing your eyes. Inhaling through the nose. Exhaling through the mouth. Dropping your shoulders. Feeling your feet on the ground. Breathing in. Letting go. Inhale. And exhale. Breathing into the belly. And on the exhale, imagining the breath moving down and through your feet. Feeling the weight of your body pressing down into the chair.
I feel very meditative.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yet I feel, and I know we didn't do it for a very long time, but I also feel very, very centered in a way. And I was feeling good before we did that. So I'm sure it's different if you weren't feeling great, but I feel like a lot of people don't get adequate breath as it is. And they're breathing through their mouth constantly. Like, little exercises like this are very powerful. How long would you, if you were really looking to change someone's state, how long would you recommend they do something like this?
Oh man, they can do it in 5 minutes. They can do it in 3 minutes. Yeah.
Even set a timer and do it that way.
Yeah. Or, I would say 3 to 5 minutes, you can change your state pretty rapidly. If you want to go longer, 15 minutes daily is a great practice. But essentially basically parasympathetic breathing, or breathing in general, I'll give overall tip here. If you want to So for example, let's say you're feeling, symptoms of depression, and you want to create a sympathetic response in the body, because depression is hyper parasympathetic state, right, where you're overly relaxed or overly subdued. So we want to create a sympathetic state. We want to get your ass out of bed ready to take on the day. If you need to do sympathetic breathing, your inhales need to be longer than your exhales. So when we look at breath practices like Wim Hof, for example, where the breath is something like this, right? People who lift, right, who do powerlifting when they're getting ready to get a big lift in, that's a natural response in their body, is to, right, because they're trying to amp their body up. Let's say you're experiencing a lot of anxiety, you've got a lot in your mind, you can't seem to like shake things off, or like you're pacing, whatever it is, you can't seem to focus. We need to take you down a few notches. And so parasympathetic breathing is longer exhales than inhales, which is what we just did, right? So you take a deep breath in, and then you let it out. And that's signaling to your body that you are in a safe environment. Everything's okay. Because when you're anxious, you're basically simulating a stressful environment, even though you're not in one. Because you're thinking about something that's very stressful, or you're assuming that something stressful will happen, but your brain doesn't know that. Your brain doesn't know that it's not currently happening. It's creating a simulation in its mind that event is currently existing right now. And so you use your physiology to remind your brain, like, hey, bro, you're in the wrong simulation right now. Everything's actually fucking okay, because everything is okay. Like when you're worried about your life and everything's freaking you the fuck out, if you breathe and relax and you pay attention to your body, what you start to notice is oh, wow, like it's a quiet room. Like I can just sit here. I can take deep breaths. My body feels fine. Like everything's actually okay right now. Like in this moment right now, everything's okay.
Yes.
And then you can choose something different.
And that's the key point right there. And then you can choose, what am I going to focus on and conquer at this stage? Like with the example that you gave with the subpoena, and with what's going on with that individual's daughter, and in this and that. What are you going to choose to focus on and put your energy towards now that you're in a better state to do so? It's one thing to just do that breathing exercise and just feel good momentarily. It's another thing to get into that state and use that state as a resource in order to better your life in one of those areas. And I think that's the key thing. Then it comes down to, what are the behaviors, again, like what we talked about, that you're going to put forth in order to put yourself in a better situation, because no one cares about you more than you do. No one's going to solve this problem if you don't solve this problem. And I could talk to you forever on these things, brother. So I want to know, for the people listening who are like, what does it look like to work with Jessie, and tell him what I want to achieve, and have him bring me through these exercises and these thought patterns and these behaviors. Like, what does it look like when you work with somebody one-on-one?
Sure. So when someone comes on board, our first session is an onboarding session. And essentially there, what we look at is, what are the external results you desire to create in your life, right? What is it that you desire to achieve, whether it's in your career, in your relationships, in your fitness, whatever that thing may be. And we create tangible ideas of what that is. Then we look at, what are the intrinsic results that you desire to create, right? Because ultimately, for you to create those external results, you have to become a different person. And so, or you have to become greater than you currently are. And so that can be whether we're developing your leadership skills, whether we're helping you develop better ways of responding to your environment, whether that's creating more consistency and more discipline, more sort of clear communication with those around you, whatever those intrinsic developments that we need to create. And then we look at the biggest obstacles, right? What are the biggest obstacles that would stop you from achieving these things? And then once we get clear on all of that, the process then becomes, depending on what frequency we meet with each other, where week over week, you are assigned different homework based on your goals. And ultimately, you create your own homework. I just help guide you and bring clarity to what that is.
Yeah.
And then there's obviously lots of tools. So whether it's the breath work, whether we do guided visualizations in session to take a look at some of these deeper things that are going on in your subconscious, and dealing with different traumas that happened to you when you were younger that could have sort of created the environment for you to, believe in the limitations that you currently have. Whether it's me giving it to you straight, from an objective point of view that you're full of shit and that you need to go and get after it. Or also, like, some guys need to just acknowledge it themselves more. Like, they're in this constant state of, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. And they're not willing to acknowledge like all the ways that they are. And that's just as powerful. Like, it's just as powerful for a man to tell another man, like, hey, I see you, bro. Like, you're making things happen right now, and you need to be aware of that. And then it's something that stacks week over week, where you're being held accountable to creating the life that you've said that you needed to create. And then based on what it is going on, always providing different references, whether it's books, podcasts, things to engage in to better support what you're going through. And then, like I said, going through the visualizations, so we can create a space where you can take a deeper dive into why you're creating sabotaging behavior, or why you're not choosing behavior that would make you great. And so that's basically how we end up working together.
That's a great system. I love that. And I appreciate you going over it, because it makes it more clear for someone who's never worked with a coach before, because working with a coach is very different than working with a therapist. Very, very different, right? Generally, your therapist doesn't look at you and say, hey, with love, you're full of shit right now. Right? At least I'd like to meet that therapist if they exist.
Yeah.
And I guess they'd be a coach, but not just a coach, because there's a lot of them, but a genuine coach who cares about the other person. Right? So thank you for going over that. Where is the best place that someone can reach out to you in order to start that conversation?
Yeah, so they can check out my website. It's just sphereofhighperformance.com. And that's also my social. So whether it's on Instagram, you can hit me up at Sphere of High Performance. And I'm always posting daily on there.
Cool.
Always giving different tips with a lot of things that we've talked about today. You can DM me if you want to chat. And I also, like, people can book a complimentary discovery call with me. So even if you're not interested in moving forward in sessions and working together, in that call, I also just help you come up with your own blueprint. So whether you go ahead and attempt to take it yourself, or you want to do it with me, you'll at least be left with something with more clarity on what you need to be doing next.
Awesome. I love that. You heard it, guys. Sphereofhighperformance.com. And you can also find Jessie on Instagram under that same handle as well. Jessie, this has been a really cool conversation, brother. And I appreciate you coming on the show. It's great meeting you. And I'm looking forward to see what you do moving from here, brother.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, man. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. This was a very real conversation on what it means to be a man, what it means to be a human being of high value. Again, if you're a woman who listened, I'm sure you took something away from this conversation too. It all comes down to taking responsibility, putting in those behaviors, right? Those behaviors are different based on the individual. But when you work with someone like Jessie, he can really help you determine what is it that you want, where is it that you feel most successful when you do these specific things, and what behaviors can we implement in order to bring you from where you are to achieving these goals and achieving this state of power, achieving this state of conquering the thing in your life that you are looking to conquer or that you need to conquer. And sometimes that extra voice can really make a big difference in your own pursuit of greatness and being better. So again, you can follow and learn more from Jessie at sphereofhighperformance.com. And you can also follow him on Instagram, where he's posting daily. I hope you took a lot away from this conversation. If you did, we didn't run any ads. We didn't show any sponsors because we didn't want to interrupt your experience here. So all that we ask is you share this show with just one other person who could use these insights as well. We have grown the way that we have over the past 2 years now because you are the best part of the Be Better team. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And as always, continue to be better.